Earlier this year, I started a series of videos about biases and logical fallacies. And unfortunately, those are amongst the worst performing videos on my channel. Message received. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think these things are important. I'll link a playlist of the videos that I've made, but if I convince you that these are things that you need to understand better, there are probably better resources on the internet than me. Biases are ways where our thinking can get short-circuited. Ultimately, we are biological computers, and biases are a way for our brains to save energy. They're a way for us to make decisions more quickly. They're a way for us to come to conclusions where otherwise we might be overwhelmed with data. Arguably, we're only able to make decisions at all due to some collection of biases. But biases can lead us to making bad decisions. Biases can lead us to doing things that are incorrect because of the traps that we fall into. So understanding the different biases can be useful for two primary reasons. One, and I would argue the most important, is that by being aware of these different biases, it helps us be aware when we are falling into these traps. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to change your mind because you realize that you are falling for a confirmation bias, for example, but it might lead you to dig a little bit deeper, gather a little bit more information before maybe ultimately sticking to your original decision. But by being aware of the biases that we are falling for, the biases in our own decision making, it can help us make better decisions. The second reason is that by being aware of these biases, we can see these traps being fallen into by other people, and it can help us to potentially help them make better decisions, or at the very least, realize when decisions are being made under incorrect circumstances, under dangerous circumstances. Why we may not be able to point out a bias to someone else and have them be super receptive to that in a lot of cases. At least being aware that the conclusion that's being reached was reached for somewhat erroneous reasons can help us potentially reach a different conclusion for ourselves, gather different data, reevaluate the decision that was made. Biases are largely about decision making. On the other hand, fallacies are more about the way we make arguments. Now, we might convince ourselves in our own decision-making process through a fallacy, an internal-facing fallacy. We might start with the conclusion we want and draw a circle around the data that we can find, basically going for the Texas sharpshooter fallacy to draw the conclusion we want to draw. But usually when we're talking about fallacies, we're talking about external-facing things. Understanding different fallacies lets us see when they are being used against us. Now, I would say that you probably, in most cases, you don't want to become a debate team nerd calling out everyone's logical fallacies in day-to-day conversations and day-to-day arguments, and even in more professional settings. That can get you dismissed fairly quickly. That can get you pushed to the side because it's a pretty annoying thing to do. But by at least being aware, it allows you to push back when that pushback is necessary. And also it allows you to avoid these fallacies for yourself when you're making your own arguments. Because if our goal is to make the right decisions when we're in discussion with people, to reach the best conclusion, we don't want to use fallacious arguments in that process. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you can use some of these fallacies to get your way, but you kind of can. Not necessarily the most ethical thing to do. That being said, one thing I would point out is that one of the groups of people where you see fallacies occur the most often are these well-trodden, well-versed, very experienced debaters. Whether it's conscious or not, their awareness of these fallacies and the effectiveness of some of those fallacies allows them, in some circumstances, to slip them in there and make arguments that are faulty but effective. I'm not super comfortable with that as a strategy, but it is used to great effect. I think we need to be careful conflating effectiveness of making an argument with accuracy of the argument being made. My ability to effectively debate doesn't automatically make my argument correct. And unfortunately, I think we live in a world where debate me, bro, is seen as a legitimate form of finding truth. And that's not true. But the more we can be aware of these tactics that are used to make arguments in ill faith, the more we can be protected to some degree against them, the more we can be prepared to make better arguments. So while being out-debated doesn't mean you're wrong, being able to argue your point of view better is still a legitimate thing to want to do. At the very least, knowing some of these fallacies can protect you from some very persuasive people who are saying some very dangerous and damaging things. So you're not going to see any more biases or fallacy videos from me. Again, if this video convinced you that this is something that you want to dig in on, there's lots of resources on the internet. I'll link the playlist of the videos that I did make. Hopefully this was convincing for at least some of you that these traps, these dangers, are useful to understand, if only to avoid them and understand them when you're hearing them from other people. We don't really teach debate and discourse in the West anymore, and I think it's a little bit of a shame because it's a skill that is being concentrated in fewer people, and those people are almost getting a superpower to convince others. They're getting an ability to manipulate others through tactics that those people aren't fully aware of. So while I'm not suggesting that you join a debate club, being aware of some of these tactics and some of these less than ideal behaviors gives you some protection when they are used against you. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, that will be linked down in the description. As well, we have a Patreon if you are more comfortable supporting the channel in that way, which will also be linked in the description. We have merch. This is Control the Triage, Control the Project. I would say that both fallacies and biases are relevant to triages. Biases make you make bad decisions in triage, and triages are nothing if not hundreds and hundreds of decisions in a row. Fallacies are a way that people can argue for that bug that maybe doesn't need to be fixed more urgently than that crash that's been lingering around for the last 6 weeks. So anywhere where you're making decisions, understanding fallacies and biases is useful. I'm a little sad to see the series go, but I can learn eventually if performance of the videos is sufficiently bad for sufficiently long. We'll move on to other things. I will see you again soon. Thank you.